According to the Olympics mission statement, they're supposed to be against any form of discrimination and also opposed to any political abuse of sports and athletes. But as soon as the opening ceremony started, it proved
that was a lie.
They started off the Olympics with things like this, and this, and the one that has people offended the most was this, which appears to be a rendition of the Last Supper of Christ with the disciples, but instead of Jesus and disciples, they were replaced with drag queens, an obvious offense to Christians everywhere. And as you would expect, Christians were incredibly upset by it, and understandably so. The Olympics is supposed to be a time to unite all other countries around the world in the spirit of sports. But instead of uniting, they seem to go out of their way to completely offend 2.6 billion people and make the main focus of the event political as opposed to sports. But it's not just Christians that are seeing this trending problem either. More and more non-Christians and people of other faiths are starting to agree that there seems to be a growing attack on Christianity. And frankly, Christians are sick of having their faith mocked and tired of being undercut and treated without the same respect that the other religions seem to have.
Whether it's Islam or Hinduism, Christianity is the most mocked religion.
And so in response to this problem, most Christians online seem to be saying things like, we need to take a stand and not allow the Olympics to mock our faith.
Paris Olympics right now is mocking Christians. If this were done to Muslims, they wouldn't tolerate it. But for some reason, we as Christians, we tolerate that. No more. We need to stand up and do something about this.
But what exactly does that mean? Do we start to become violent like Islam? What approach should we take in response? Well, one way to respond is how George Janko did on X. He made a tweet saying, "I'm respectfully not watching the Olympics this year. I'd ask for you to peacefully do the same." So his recommended approach is something like respectfully boycott the Olympics so that way your voice can be heard, but not out of rage, anger, or attacking. But others, like Brandon Tatum, for example, took a far different approach. Tatum responded like this.
You making fun of and mocking Jesus of Nazareth, then I'm gonna make fun of you looking like a greasy pig. Look like somebody gonna put on a roast and roll over. 400 pounds.
But still, others like Ryan Garcia took it even further. Garcia tweeted a bunch of things like this. They, them, I hate you. Blank you, Jezebel. I'm protected by the Most High. Burn in hell, trans people. And other tweets along those lines. But if we're Christians, our ultimate authority doesn't come from what people like me or them say, or even what masculine culture tells us how we should respond. The important question we should be asking is, how does the Bible tell us to respond to this sort of mockery and insults from non-Christians? One of the most direct places that I can think of in Scripture that answers this question directly is found in 1 Peter 2, where Peter tells us how we should live as Christians if we find ourselves persecuted in a non-Christian society. He says, "Live such good lives among the pagans that, though they accuse you of doing wrong, they may see your good deeds and glorify God on the day he visits. To this you are called, because Christ suffered for you, leaving you an example that you should follow in his steps. When they hurled their insults at him, he did not retaliate. When he suffered, he made no threats. Instead, he entrusted himself to him who judges justly." So although I can resonate with the frustration that Tatum and those like him have when it comes to things like this, when he justifies responding to insults with insults, we know that that isn't the way that we're commanded to respond. As Paul says in Romans 12, and as Peter says in the next chapter, we shouldn't repay insult for insult or evil with evil. We need to emulate Christ, who didn't repay insult for insult and instead trusted God to judge justly. So does this mean that we shouldn't be angry? Of course not. Be angry, but don't sin in your anger. Nor does this mean that we should just ignore it and not let our voices be heard. In fact, one way that we can respond is to boycott, like George Janko said. So this doesn't mean that we should just sit and do nothing. Instead, we need to let our voices be heard while also being careful not to drift into sin and act out of our flesh when doing so. Despite our anger and frustration, God doesn't wish that any should perish, and so we shouldn't either. And even more importantly, we can't do so from a place of self-righteousness, as Ryan Garcia's tweet came off as doing. The reason why is because the gospel tells us that we're no more deserving of salvation than every single trans person on that stage. We're no more qualified of heaven than they are, or even the worst person that you can think of right now. If we've ever broken one of God's laws, then it's as if we've broken the entire law and committed every evil act that they have. So we're not saved because we're good people. The only reason that we're saved is not because of how good or moral that we are, but instead it's only because of how good Christ is. So if I know that I'm so incapable of living a good enough life that Christ had to die for me instead in my place, if I know that the only reason that I'm saved is because Christ had to offer me his life as a free and undeserved gift, then how could I possibly look down on others and claim that they deserve hell and suggest that I don't? I can't, because my filthy sin deserves hell just as much as theirs does. So we need to remember that we can only be saved because Christ is good and we aren't. So we have no right to feel any less deserving of hell than anyone else, including everybody on stage that day. Now, if this video spoke to you in any way, hit that like button on your way out, and things are getting pretty crazy out there. So I'm sure I'll see you guys soon.